We are living through strange days. Across Britain, Europe and America, societies have become split and polarised, not just in politics, but across the whole culture. There is anger at the inequality and the ever-growing corruption, and a widespread distrust of the elites. Yet at the same time, there is a paralysis, a sense that no one knows how to escape from this. Even in America, where there is now hope with the new president, there are also fears that despite the growing crisis, the system will just return to normal.
And that is the voice of Adam Curtis. And now you hear him live on the programme. Hello, Adam. Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon. I'm fine, thank you.
And where do we find you? Are you busy hard at work or are you taking it easy? How's lockdown been for you?
I'm busy trying to work out what song to put at the end of my whole series, and I can't find one.
Okay, well, I want to talk about music because there's a lot of music to discuss in this series of films. So I've said that it's called Can't Get You Out of My Head, an emotional history of the modern world. I remember from university, the lecturers always saying, define your terms. Can you just sort of unpack the title then? An emotional history, first of all. What are you saying here? What are you claiming here?
Well, what I'm saying is I think that the time we live through, and I think we all know this, is that we're encouraged to believe, we do believe that what we feel inside us is pretty much the most important thing in the world, and also the most truthful thing, rather than being told by old patrician people like the BBC what to think. What we feel inside us is sort of the guiding force that we should follow. It's the age of the self. And I wanted to, what I've always been interested in is why we have gone from being a confident self to, over the last 10, 15 years, to being a very unconfident self. There's a sense of anxiety, uncertainty, and many people would say fear at the moment about the future. And I thought that if you were going to do a history to try and explain that, you'd have to try and explain what went on inside people's heads as much as what went on in the society outside them. So I decided to do a history which incorporated that. If you live in a world, in a time, an age in which feelings are the most important thing, or one of the most important things, then a history of that time has got to incorporate a history of those feelings.
Which would be quite a task to represent on screen.
Not if you tell stories. If you tell stories about people, then A, you've got something that will interest people, and B, you've got something to put on screen.
And is that sense that you're talking about, I mean, it's quite clear as soon as anyone watches the first of the shows that this is not, certainly the events of the happening in Britain are at the heart of a lot of what you're talking about, but this is an international film. You're taking in Russia, you're taking in China. Just explain how you've got different centers, and America, of course, different centers to this story.
Well, the other thing I got interested in is why in every powerful country across the world, or powerful society across the world, those in charge, those in power, and those near power, none of them have any idea of an alternative, better future. There's lots of dystopian ideas about terrible dark futures coming our way, but among all sorts of people, including those progressives who you would expect at a time of anxiety and crisis to come up with other futures, they haven't. And that's really where I started from. And I wanted to try and explain all the different forces that have led to that.
I'll ask you something about organising the material. There's 6 shows. I've seen the first 4 of them so far. And one of the things that happens during the course of them is you have a series of stories, as you said, that are set up that then play out in very unexpected ways over the subsequent episodes. So, for example, we meet somebody in the very first episode who, by the time we get to episode 4, we're hearing a really strange story about somebody being on screen with somebody else when they were young, later ascending to a situation of power whereby they have it in them to torture that person, which seems like an incredibly bizarre fairy tale. You couldn't make this stuff up. And one of the things that the film does all the way through is talks about an internal narrative, the story that you would imagine of yourself, and a story outside of what's actually happening to people, and this tension between what you think the world consists of and what it actually consists of. And there's a fascinating thread about conspiracy theories. We have a character who at the beginning we meet is completely anti-conspiracy theory. By the time we're in episode 4, he's fallen into believing that maybe all these things are conspiracies. How did you organize that material? Because you must have created a an overarching narrative to get all this collage of stuff. We're getting clips of movies, we're getting, you know, news interviews, we're getting extraordinary meetings between a transgender woman and a doctor who doesn't take us seriously. What was the organizing principle with which you brought this into being?
The organizing principle is pretty much what you just said at the beginning there. The thing that really fascinates me is what happens to people when they are acted upon by powerful ideas from outside them. What then happens to those powerful ideas when they get inside those people's heads? And I think in our age, where we are encouraged to think of ourselves as free individuals, that tension between the big forces outside us and what then happens when they get inside our heads is really the sort of dynamic of our time. I mean, the person you talk about just then, who was a young individualist in the late 50s, early 60s, who thought that conspiracy theories were in a way a tool of the powerful to try and make us feel helpless, and set out to try and parody them, ends up by the end of the 1970s, because he's feeling isolated and alone, wondering whether in fact he himself might have been part of a conspiracy. And in a way, I think that sort of is getting at one of the great things of our time, is that in an age of the individual, it is wonderful to be free, to not to be told by old upper classes, by old patricians, what to do. That's fantastic. And we've lived through that age and it's great. But its downside is that you are on your own. And that's fine when things are going well, but when things go badly, you are weak and uncertain. And that's what happened to that guy. And in a way, I think he sort of epitomizes the story of our time, is that we were going to live in this fantastic world where we would be at the center of everything and we would be in charge of our own lives. But it brings uncertainties with it.
The other thing that brings up for me is, and again, you talk about stories. You know, I've just been doing this Secrets of Cinema series for BBC4, and one of the things we do is we take 120 movies that have nothing in common, and we look for patterns, we look for things that are repeating, and we find them, and that's how we manage to organize the thing. But we've imposed this on it. And one of the things that you're talking about in the documentary is the way in which we either do or don't impose an order on the events around us. And once again, coming back to that person you were talking about, them actually coming out, having first introduced the bogus idea of the Illuminati being behind everything, then find themselves having constructed a narrative that they start to believe in, even though they know it's not true.
Yes, I do think one of the great central things of our time is that guy we mustn't give too much of the story away, but that guy meets the godfather of modern conspiracy theories, who is a guy called Jim Garrison, who really put forward the JFK conspiracy theory. He had this principle which he called time and propinquity.
Yeah.
What that really means is you'll never find out what the real power are doing because it'll be too hidden. You'll never find the true narrative because they always hide it. What you have to look for, he said, are patterns on the surface, little links and coincidences that are like telltale shoots coming up, showing you the hidden power underneath. And I think in a way he was sort of one of the ideologists of our time, because if you look at the internet now, that's what everyone does. They spend their days and their nights scrolling through the internet, looking for patterns, links, coincidences. And funnily enough, that's exactly how artificial intelligence works. Artificial intelligence works not by looking at the logic of a sentence, but just by seeing which letters are often close to each other and which are not. And what I argue at the end of the films is that in a way, one of the places we now find ourselves in is a world where we don't have any logical meanings any longer. What we have is patterns. A bit like what you're describing with your films, is human beings can always find patterns. What they lack is the meaning behind those patterns. And that's why we feel a little bit lost at the moment, I think. And
if the name Jim Garrison rings a bell, it was of course played by Kevin Costner in the JFK movie, and so it was interesting to see in your film the real guy. And actually, Kevin Costner wasn't far off. Just on that subject, and before we move on from that, you talk about that dark paranoia built into America from the start, and conspiracy theories. We know a bit about that, but one of the illuminating things, maybe that's an inappropriate word, maybe the enlightening things that you explain is you take it right back to that kind of American experience. Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by that. Ever since recently we've had this theory that Donald Trump was actually a tool of Vladimir Putin.
Yes.
I was fascinated because in the 1950s, there was lots of the right-wingers were convinced that President Eisenhower was actually a Russian agent. And I suddenly thought, there is this sort of pattern in America. And then I stumbled upon this book by a man called Richard Hofstadter, who argues that actually, if you go back to in America's history, right to the settlers' history, the Europeans who came in, there is a paranoia at the heart of it. And I think his argument, and other people have argued this, is that the people who came to escape from the old world of Europe to America were coming because they wanted to escape from corruption. But what that brought with them is a suspicion that there might be corruption coming to haunt them. So right from the start, you've got this sense of people wanting to create a new world, but constantly aware that the old forces of corruption might have come with them in some way or another. And what Hofstadter and other people argue is that actually that suspicion has always haunted America, and that you get it now. I mean, the Illuminati was one of the first conspiracy theories in America, and I think the 1810s, that somehow the Illuminati were trying to undermine the government. And it's always been there, and it comes up at moments of crisis. And I think we've just seen it recently again.
Just while we have you, Adam, we started off by talking about music, and you're still looking for a track with which to finish your last film. I wrote down as soon as you have the specials and Do Nothing, which is on quite early on in your, unless you've changed it in the mix, but anyway, the specials is there. Do Nothing, great track. Song for Zulu by Phosphorescent is there.
Isn't that lovely?
Yes, amazing
Beautiful
track.
song.
Air by the Incredible String Band is there. Can you? Mark was asking you about an organizing sort of system. Is it they don't seem to be obviously related? How do you grab these tracks, because they work once they're in the film?
Because I like them, and I don't mean that in a flip way. What I try and do in my films is create a mood that I feel explains as much as what I'm saying in the words. And I look for music that I think creates that mood, and I think I'm probably quite normal, and if it creates that mood in me, it might well do it in the people watching the film. It's really like that. The thing I think is, you know, that thing which is a terrible disease in factual television, which is that when you've got a subject like bankers, they'll put in a literal song like Money by the Pink Floyd.
Yes, always.
And your heart sinks when they do that, because actually it stops you experiencing the film. You go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, Money, Pink Floyd. And whereas what I think you do is you put in music that keeps the mood going, that they actually feel it rather than thinking about it. I know that sounds a bit odd, but it's somehow, you can explain a lot more that way.
Can I just say, it's absolutely wonderful to hear somebody referring to them as the Pink Floyd. It makes me feel like I'm you know, the definite article has restored my faith in the world. They are Pink Floyd.
Aren't they called the Pink Floyd? I think they are.
Pink Floyd. They were originally, but then everyone's just sort of calling them Pink Floyd. So the Pink Floyd is completely well done.
So Adam, what's your dilemma for the end? What kind of musical track are you looking for? You know, Mark is a musical encyclopedia.
Well, I tell you what, okay, this isn't giving too much away. I put in a song which logically works, which was a song by the Cranberries called Zombie. Yeah?
Yeah.
And it makes sense because it's all about in my head and everything. But then I had a terrible sleepless night where I thought, I don't actually like that song. I really don't. I mean, this is all due respect to Cranberry fans, but I just don't like it. And I just couldn't do it. So I've had to take it out. And I'm now looking for a song that I do like, but still allows me to make sense of what I'm trying to say. And it's just difficult.
But you also really enjoy a well-chosen cover version. I mean, one of the things that you've done all along, I mean, that's a particular pleasure. Oh, I know that song, but I didn't know that version of it.
I've just done for The Guardian my 11 best cover versions of all time. I think
what was number one?
A really strange electronica version of There Is a Light That Never Goes Out by a German guy called Schneider 360, which I just think is amazing.
And which is in one of the programs.
Which is in one of the programs. That's right, number 4. Yeah.
Adam, it's been great talking to you. When could you communicate with us somehow so that we know how you filled the gap? Once you found the piece of music, would you let us know somehow? Just because I'm now intrigued. I mean, I can wait obviously for the film to go out, but
I have to decide by Sunday night because that's when it has to be locked.
Well, can I just say that you can never go wrong with skiffle, Adam. Never. I mean, honestly, a good rattling skiffle tune. I have the double bass here. Seriously, I can knock something up for you. You know, very cheap.
Can you make me cry with it?
Oh God, yes.
Just
Oh,
say
God, I
no,
can make
Adam.
you
Just
cry.
say no. Just say no. We're
I,
going
I'll
down.
tell you. I'll tell you where my brain is heading on this one. It's towards a band that I absolutely love from the early '90s called This Norton Coil,
Yeah.
and I think I'll find it somewhere there because I just love them.
All right.
They're wonderful.
Adam Curtis, we appreciate you speaking to us, and thank you very much for spending some time.
Pleasure. Thank you.